So we finally got our turbo dart over to the track to make a couple of initial, shakedown passes, baseline passes. And I'm going to tell you about that in a minute. But before I do that, I want to address some of the comments from the first video we did on this. Now understand something. Supercharging, I know superchargers. And in fact, I even built a supercharged Slant 6, I don't know, 2-3 years ago. But when it comes to turbochargers, I am a novice. I'm learning this stuff. A lot of you guys made comments about, or scrap that thing and put a blow-through setup on it, use this injection setup, put an intercooler, blah, 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 on and on and on. And I value those comments and I value those opinions. But the mission here with this thing right now is to get as much as we can out of it, right? At some point down the road, Jim, the owner of the car, may decide to go another direction, but before he does that, I want to maximize this and see what we can get out of it. And one of the reasons I want to maximize this particular setup is because I know that these are very common and very cheap. This is a deal that was used by General Motors as well as a couple other manufacturers from 1960 up until 1985. This was originally on the Corvair Monza, the Turbo Monza, and it had a side draft carburetor on it instead of a regular carburetor. But it had a side draft carb. And then they used this on the old Jetfire. They used it on just so many different applications, right up until 1985 with the Buick V6s and the 301 Pontiacs. And that's what this setup is from. This is from a 301 Pontiac. So, and it's all fresh. I don't know the exact lineage behind this thing, but everything on it is new. So there's no sense in just throwing the baby out with the bathwater until we see what we can get out of this. And what we're looking to get out of this is just solid street strip performance. Just something that'll run down in the 13s and just be reliable and go down a road with it with no problems. So let's talk about the track. He gets to the track, ran over here Buffalo Valley or local strip, and goes 1340 with it. Well, that's pretty impressive, yeah? Except that it's an 1/8 mile track. 1340 equates out to approximately 2185. Which is like, it's good and it's bad. It's bad because this thing is now, it's approximately 3.5 seconds slower than it was completely stock. And it's good because no matter what I do to it is going to be a performance improvement. Go Uncle Tony, right? But that's slow. So he made a couple of passes and same result. He tried power braking, he tried all different techniques to get it to go, and that was it. So there's got to be issues here. So the next morning he brings it here, he drops it off over here, and he tells me what happened. I said, well, let's go for a spin, let's see what this thing does. So he took it out on the road over here and made a couple of runs with it, and jogs. We made a couple of jogs with strolls. We made a couple of strolls with it, and as it turns out, it was making 1 pound of boost, which doesn't, that doesn't really equate. How is this thing only making 1 pound of boost? So now this is something you have to keep in mind. Jim bought this car online, and aside from just opening the hood, seeing what was there, and closing the hood, he's done nothing to it. This is exactly the way he bought it, and that's why I wanted it. I was like, yeah, just bring me the raw product and let's see what we got. So when it went to the track, it was under those exact conditions. It is exactly the way it was delivered. So I says, well, let's give this thing a quick look. So I popped the air cleaner off, and what I found was this pull-off the bracket is bent. And because the bracket is bent, the little rod here that actuates the choke, it was binding up. So the choke was only opening about halfway. And because the choke was only opening about halfway, it had no secondary operation at all. So that kind of explains, a lot of what was going on. So I said, all right, let's straighten this out and get the choke open and make sure that, we got secondaries, and we did. So we take her for another blast, and now she runs up to about 4 pounds of boost, and it starts detonating like crazy, right? That's not good. Let's see what we got going on here. So I brought it back here and started going over the basics. So one of the first things I found was the guy who put this car together originally bought some very nice parts, but he wasn't very experienced with just the mechanical basics. And like an indication of that is look at the way this PCV is set up. So here's a PCV valve, and he's got it hooked to the vent tube on the carburetor, and then just a random line that runs off to a port on the charcoal canister. So it's like he bolted it together nice, but he didn't know the fine details, little stuff like that. So I pulled the plugs. Now obviously we didn't get a run on the car, and it had been running around with the choke, but the plugs look fairly even, you know, a little on the fat side, but that's kind of to be expected under the circumstances. What this tells me though is that we're getting basically even distribution through the intake manifolds. I can't really learn anything about the performance characteristic of the plug, but I can, you know, of the engine by these plugs, but I can tell that the distribution is fairly even. So that's something we don't have to think about. So I says, well, let's see what we got as far as compression goes. So I crank this thing, and what we have is the high cylinder is 60 pounds. They average between like 30 and 50, but the high is this one, and it was 60 pounds. Oh, shit, okay, this is a problem. The head is fresh from the machine shop. I know it was cut, and you can see it's fresh. And there was no indication, no noise at the exhaust, no backfiring up through the intake, so I know that it's not a valve sealing issue. I thought perhaps it might be a cam timing issue. Maybe the timing chain jumped a tooth, and recently I had a Slant 6 cam, an aftermarket Slant 6 cam that was ground 11 degrees retarded. It was just a mistake. So I checked the cam timing on this, and you know, we got split overlap straight up at top dead center number 1. So I know that's not the problem. What we have is a baked bottom end. So Jim is going to come by this weekend, and we're going to pull this motor out, break it down, see what the damage is. I kind of already know what the damage is going to be. I think we've got crushed ring lands. So we'll go through it, and of course we'll make sure that the top rings are gapped for boost. That's a big issue, you know. I don't know if this is the setup we're going to stick with. I don't know if we're going to try to go beyond 10 or 12 pounds with it. So we'll make sure that the bottom end is as ready for boost as we can make it. What else is there? The only other thing I did with the car was, I noticed right away, as soon as I saw the car, that the nose was down in the weeds. The original owner had the torsion bars completely loose in the front end, was riding on the bump stops. So I adjusted the front end back up to approximately the way it's supposed to be. And on these cars, if you're not familiar, right, on a Mopar, just as a ballpark, you want to have the back of the rocker and the front of the rocker approximately the same height, if not a hair higher in the front. That's the way these cars are intended to work from a geometrical standpoint. Now in this car, that's pretty hard to achieve because we have a big stagger, size difference between the back tire and the front tire. But taking the actual level of the car out, but only taking into account the geometry of the front end, is pretty much where it needs to be. So we're content with that. So that's pretty much it. This weekend we'll get this thing out, we'll see what's up with it, and then we'll take it to the next step, and I'll bring you guys up to speed early next week. So until then, I'll see you tomorrow.